Hello and welcome back to episode 2 of the new layout build series. Today we do get some track work done on the layout, but most importantly in today's episode, we do actually expand the entire layout by quite a bit. Anyways, let's get started with today's episode. The first thing I'll be doing is painting my track and my turnouts before we tack anything down. I'll be using the same thing that I used in the past, which is this earth brown camo Rust-Oleum spray paint. Once I have all my track laid out outside, I can start spraying. One thing I do focus on when doing this is getting the sides of the rails, and this is to get rid of that unrealistic shine that they have when they're new. I do go as light as I can with the paint so I don't have any troubles getting it off later on. To clean the top of the rails, I'll be using some wood dowels. The dowel takes off the paint with no problem. Now there are other ways to clean the top of the rails, but I do like this method because the wood dowels are cheap and also they do not scratch the track. When the end of the dowel does get dirty, I just cut it off to start with a nice clean end piece. In the end, I did go through about 2 total sticks. One thing I will advise is doing this the day that you paint, or it'll be really tough to get that paint off. I waited maybe 8 to 12 hours after painting it so that it was dry, but not too dry to where I will struggle to get it off. Here is the difference between new track and painted track. The earth brown does leave the rails in a nice, more realistic matte finish, and same goes for the railroad ties, which also can be weathered a little bit more later down the line. Of course, if you do own an airbrush, you can do this a little bit easier, but for $7 a can and some effort, I think this is pretty good. Now that we're done painting the track, we can start laying it out again as we did before. Except this time we can actually start tacking it down to the foam. Now this all does slightly change since we do expand the layout, but I just want to show exactly how I do cut my track and how I lay it down before we do glue it down permanently. The nails I've always used are these little tiny ones. You can see that I have old railroad ties in here from my previous times of laying down track. These nails do fit perfectly with the Code 100 Flex track. The first thing I am tacking down is the main line. I'm also using a ruler to help keep it straight along the edge of the layout. One thing you do have to do is to take off the last tie on each end just for the rail joiners to fit. These rail joiners are the ones that came with the turnouts. You will need to invest into track cutters or a Dremel tool in my case. Rail joiners are on and now we can connect the tracks together. As you can probably tell, there is a gap between both rails, but it's pretty easily solved by just pushing on the other end where the rail actually moves, if that makes sense hopefully. And that's how I tack my track down before any gluing. And also this is where I actually push that track in like I mentioned before. Tacking down the turnouts is the same, but the nails sometimes do struggle to go through on them. That's why I'm using a screwdriver to kind of force the nails down. The curves are pretty much the same exact process, but you do want to make sure that your curve isn't too sharp or your engines or your rolling stock won't go through nicely. I like to get one end attached and then I see what I need to cut off on the other end. I simply line up the rails and I lightly mark where I need to cut. And then I cut away with the Dremel tool. So one thing I also do is I do scrape off some of the paint where the rail joiners go. I'm not sure if this does anything, but I do want to make sure I have a solid electric flow, so I do it anyways. It can sometimes be tricky to get them connected, but you just need to be patient and wiggle them till they do get connected. And you also want to make sure you have a nail at the ready to make sure they stay in place. Now I am testing out the curve with my longest rolling stock to make sure it goes smoothly. For the most part, I do slightly move all of this track a little bit, including the yard part. The next clip, you can actually see the turnout has actually moved back to make the curve a little bit more wider. Overall, I'm trying to achieve at least a 24-inch radius, if not 22 inches. Track plans will relatively stay the same even after the expansion. And here's the expansion part. It was actually pretty easy. I used all these same sections from before and just added 4 feet to each side of the layout. This way it goes wall to wall. Here's what it looks like coming into the layout room. In total, the expansion cost about 80 bucks since I did need more materials. Apologies for my buddy's bathroom there in the corner. I tried to get it out of the shot. So all there is left to add is the foam on top. And that's the expansion. This will be far better for the future and will allow for more cool stuff to be added, and it does also make my yard a few feet bigger, which I'm really happy about. Here is more of an exact visual of what I did. So this was the original plan, which was made up of 4 separate sections which come apart fairly easy. Then I made a 4x3 foot section and a 4x2 foot section, and I kind of moved everything around and added both to each ends. And I actually did do this for a reason, because I already had track laid on the big section, and the section that you walk in on is actually cut at a slight angle. So therefore I couldn't put the 10x2 side in front of the doorway. It did actually take a whole weekend of planning and actually doing it, but in the long run, I think this will be far better than what I had originally planned. So this is pretty much where we are at progress-wise. Of course, with the expansion, I wasn't able to do too much track work, but by next episode, I do plan to have pretty much all the track laid, and hopefully we could get started on the actual wiring. But overall, I'm pretty happy with getting the expansion done over the weekend. And now we can pretty much move on and get to the fun stuff. As usual, I do want to thank you guys for watching. I do have a lot planned for the future, and I also did get a new locomotive this past week, so hopefully I will post a video unboxing that in the next couple of days. On that note, I hope you guys all enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one.